metrics that we use: salient, compelling, and relevant. And so we'll talk a little bit about what that means. Third, it's really being able to connect the dots between what we do in marketing and the money we spend and the results we produce. And again, a lot of marketers think that they're doing that, but it's a very weak link. And so we'll spend a little more time about what that means. And then how do we create value? So there's a lot of conversation out there about marketing ROI, and it's a really bad rabbit hole to go down. If that's the only view that you're going to have in terms of evaluating the value of your marketing. So we need to talk a little bit about other ways to look at marketing. So if you could meet these expectations, imagine what it would mean for you as a marketing organization. And I would love for us to be able to talk about that, and if we get time at the end, I would like to do that. But more importantly, it has huge implications on the influence you have in the organization and the resources you get access to. You know, because you work in the financial and insurance industry, I know you understand the concept of investments. And so we are being asked in marketing to make investments on behalf of the organization. When they give us the money, that's what we're doing. And just like the customers in our industry who want to see some return on that investment, some value for that money, so does the C-suite. So we're living in a world where what our customers expect is exactly what our leadership expects. And so we need to be able to articulate that in ways that are meaningful to them. So with that in mind, let's talk about some of the things that are important and that distinguish the best-in-class marketers from the rest. And this research, I'm going to share with you data over a period of time, but if you want to get a copy of the full report, you can buy that from us. There are also plenty of articles out there that have been written about this topic, about our research, so you can look for those as well. But there are a few marketers who are doing this quite well, and I want to talk about that group. So before we do, let's talk about how we understand that group. So over the last 15 years, we've been asking the same question of the C-suite very consistently. We asked them to grade their marketing organization on the ability to prove their value, impact, and contribution to the business. And we have hundreds and hundreds of CEOs and CFOs and other members of the C-suite participate in this research. It's global. It crosses all industries, all sizes, all regions. And it's B2B as well as B2C. And there are no statistical significant differences by any of those segments. It's pretty amazing how consistent the research is, regardless of those nuances. So I pulled the last 7 years just so you could see what the trend looks like. And what we asked them to do is make this evaluation using a grading scale of 90 to 100, 80 to 89, 70 to 79, and 69 and less. And those that score in the 90 to 100 are given an A, very traditional view, American view. Those that score 80 to 89 are given a B, and those that are 70 to 79 a C, and 69 or less are a D. And what you can see here is it's been quite consistent that about 20 to 25% of marketing organizations earn that 90 to 100. That's a pretty small number. You can see that the Bs, this group up here, is a fairly substantial group. They've had their trials and they're coming out of a deep hole, but they represent somewhere near 40%. The rest of the marketers are Cs and Ds, laggards, so to speak. And you can see that the number of marketers in the D category are rising. And we don't have time to talk about what's going on there, but there are some interesting things in terms of talent that are going on there. So as a result of this work, we now can organize these marketers into 3 personas. And I know many of you are probably doing work around personas, so this will probably resonate with you. The A's are what we call value creators. And what is interesting about them is they're really all about being those business people and figuring out how to contribute to business outcomes and create value for customers and the organization. The B's are what you would call the middle of the pack group, and they're sales enablers. They really are very linear in the way they look at at marketing, and they see themselves predominantly in service to the sales organization. And they're looking at marketing performance more from an efficiency perspective than an effectiveness perspective. The campaign producers are all about the stuff they make, the output, the activity, getting things done on time and within budget. And they are what is known as campaign producers. They operate a lot like an agency. They're just within the walls of the organization. You can probably think about which of these best reflects your organization. There can be more than one of these in a very large entity, a large enterprise, and you might even recognize other organizations and where they might fit. So why do we care? Well, one of the reasons we care is that the only group that has consistent championship from the CEO are value creators. And the key thing to note here is that the CFO is very critical of the other two groups. So the sales enablers and campaign producers are in constant friction with the CFO. The value creators don't face that same challenge. So if you're, when we're talking with marketing organizations and they find their budgets constantly at risk on the chopping block, kind of perceived as a spigot or a slush fund for the organization, they're probably in one of these two groups. The other thing has to do with credibility. If you look at how credible the perception of the marketing organization, the value creators are the only group that is moving into that 8 out of 10 range on being credible. And you can see that the campaign producers and sales enablers are struggling there. In fact, the campaign producers, if you look at them from a perspective of the C-suite, are really challenged because they're down in that 4 to 5 range out of 10. So if you want more credibility and you want the support of the C-suite, then you need to be able to be one of the value creators. So perception and proof, let's talk a little bit about that. The proof is really in the numbers, the business results, and the kinds of things that the value creators look at in terms of their impact on the business is not only different, but their ability to show how they are moving those needles is much better. So if you look at things like revenue growth, contribution to pipeline, win rate, share of wallet, which should be something I know that people in your industry take a very hard look at, customer lifetime value, customer retention, acquisition of new customers, on all, it doesn't matter, all those business metrics, the value creators are much, much better than their counterparts. They're not perfect, they're still down in the high C's, low B's for the most part, and sometimes less than that. But compared to their colleagues, they're much, much better at being able to make the connection between the work they do and these business results. So how do they do it? I want to take us through the 10 things they do. They do 6 things very, very well, and you can learn about all 6 of these things right on our website. Number 1 is alignment. It's actually the number 1 thing they do. They have figured out how to make sure that what they are doing in marketing is aligned to the business outcomes. We'll talk about that. I'm going to give you some suggestions. Second, they're all about accountability. They really are clued in to what matters to the business, what metrics matter, and how to measure them, and what data they need to get there. And their dashboards are very different. Third is analytics. They are analytically inclined. They're building their analytical muscle. I always say I've had the privilege of only working for 2 types of organizations in my career, and that's accountants, or finance and accountants, and engineers, all of which are very numbers oriented. So that was kind of drilled into me quite early. And so analytics is all about data and analytics. It's more, accountability is about the measurement, which is a type of data, but then you've got to have insights and other types of analytics and models in order to make better business decisions that are beyond just measuring marketing. Third is activation, and this has to do with agility and marketing ops. And next is alliances. These guys are forging, these best-in-class marketers are forging extraordinary, explicit, collaborative partnerships with the sales organization. So they're not in service to, they see themselves in partnership with, as finance and with IT. And lastly, they are relentlessly pursue continuous improvement, getting better. It's all about achieving and aspiring to excellence. So let's look at the key secret behind the first two, because if you don't get the first two right, the rest isn't really going to matter, and you'll just be kind of wallowing around. So the real secret behind accountability and alignment has to do with something known as acumen. And this is all tied to that very first thing that we mentioned that the C-suite expects from us, and that is to be members of the business team. And acumen is, we think we know what it is, but it means that we can assimilate information from a variety of sources, and we can use that information to help make good business decisions quickly. So there's back to that agility. And we can use them to help us understand, devise, and if necessary, adjust our strategies and our action plan. So it's all about being, again, agile and adaptive. So business acumen, how good are those best-in-class marketers at it? Well, they're not stellar, but they're, again, much better than their counterparts. And over the last few years, the sales enablers have been kind of trying to work at that. They've kind of gotten themselves back at where they were a couple of years ago. They kind of lost some momentum, but as you can see, same with the campaign producers. But again, a really important area to be working on is that business acumen. So how do you get it, right? That's the first thing. So the first thing is you have to be in the know. And that means you have, how does your company really operate and what's top of mind for your leadership team? And as marketers, it's easy to get into the situation where our nose is to the grindstone and our shoulders to the boulder, and we're just trying to wade through the exhaustive list of things we need to get done. So that's when you're in that place, you're not really thinking about the business. You're thinking about the stuff. And so we have to kind of back from that. So I was in a meeting yesterday with with a company and some of their leadership team, particularly in their marketing ranks, and they said, well, how deep, how far down into the marketing organization do we need to have members of the marketing team being in the know? And the bottom line is all the way down, because the people, the front line needs to understand what's going on so that the work that they do every day, they understand how it connects to what is making a difference for the company. So the front line, all the way down in the front line, you have to have this acumen. You have to be a consummate collaborator. That means, again, you have to get out of your cube, off your email, and cultivate internal relationships. Learn what they do, how they work together, how to collaborate and work together to serve the business better. And context. So again, back to the front line. Read everything you can about your market, your customers, your products, your competitors, your industry. It's amazing when I talk with a lot of marketing communications people. They're really good at understanding a lot of the things that are going on in our world, whether it's on the social or the mobile or the digital or any, the event mode, all of the things that are happening, the marketing, around automation, technology. They're really clued into what's happening in our discipline, but not so much about what's going on with the competition, the market, and customers in the industry. So kind of need to get that up periscope. Maintaining line of sight. So always being able to manage performance within the perspective of the business, not performance within perspective of the function. And again, that's back to having that business view. So line of sight begins with this alignment. And as you can see, again, pretty big differences across the groups. Value creators working really hard at that alignment. So how do you get to that alignment? And how do you, what's another thing that you need to do? Well, to get there, you have to understand what the leadership team expects marketing to impact, and then make it very clear how you're doing that. And again, you can see here, value creators much better. If you look at 4 years of data and you look at each persona, the campaign producers kind of stuck, sales enablers kind of stuck, value creators making headway, forwards, backwards, sometimes to go forward you have to go a little sideways or backwards. This year not maybe as strong, but still considerably better, twice as good as sales enablers, and almost 4.5 times better than campaign producers on being able to really make it clear to the leadership how marketing impacts the business. So I'm going to give you a little tool that you might find helpful, and you will need to adapt it, but it will help. This is a conversation to have that will help you ensure you get alignment, then ask the right kind of question to help and build your acumen, and help you make the right kinds of decisions before you move into action mode. So the first thing is when someone asks you to do something, or you're about to begin to do something, and many of our customers are working on their marketing plans right now. And we engage in this conversation regarding every single program and objective and campaign that's on a marketing plan. First question, what is the specific measurable business outcome this program or this campaign or this objective is expected to impact? So if you don't know the answer to this, you shouldn't go into action mode, because how can you go into action mode if you don't understand what it is, the needle you're trying to move? Secondly, how do you really expect this program to contribute? How far is it going to move that needle? And lastly, how will you know that it did? So when you get these three things very clear in your mind, you're beginning to understand the acumen, right? Demonstrating acumen, understand how to create the alignment, and then getting clarity around the accountability. So this is the kind of conversation that you need to have before you engage in any activity. So when someone comes to you and asks you to do an event, or someone comes to you and asks you to run a campaign, if you don't know the answer to these three questions, you should engage in this conversation. The next thing then is, when you have this alignment, you're beginning to go down the path that will help you master selecting the right metrics. And again, big differences in terms of selecting the right metrics. Still not perfect, on a scale of 1 to 10, value creators still have some work to go. They're, getting a C grade, but far better than their counterparts. So selecting the right metrics that measure marketing's value, contribution, and impact. That's really critical. So today, marketing has so many measures. There's so many things we can measure. It's overwhelming, and as a result, we don't use our measures to tell a very good story. We need to know which measures to select and how to tell a good story, because credibility begins right here, selecting the right metrics. And that means that your metrics have to tie back to those business priorities and those outcomes. And so again, 3 years of data, you can begin to see people are kind of stuck where they are. They're not making a lot of headway over the last 3 years. Their numbers haven't changed a lot, and that says that they're stuck. So that probably means they need to do something differently, because we all know what the definition of insanity is: doing the same things over and over and expecting different results. So clearly the results are not changing, so some processes need to change. Now think about that. Here are all of us in marketing making huge investments in new technology, new tools, in analytics, but we're not moving this number. So that's an indication of process. Probably need a different process and a different way of looking at something. So I want to share with you this continuum of ours. It's out there in the public domain. It's been used on some Wikipedia pages. It's been used by other associations. And this is a continuum of left to right, looking at metrics and measures. And what's important here isn't just to understand what category your metrics might be in, but it's also important to understand the relationship of these categories to each other, and the relationship or hierarchy of your metrics to each other. Because if you're not creating a chain, that sort of outcome impact chain of your measures, there's no logic behind how your measures work and play together, you're kind of missing the mark. And so what you can see here is that we're really, really good as marketers, and have been for a very long time, at measuring activity. We know how to do it really, really well, and it comes easy to us. And we have a tendency many times to go here first. And these are the last metrics we should look at. And this is the primary place where campaign producers spend their energy, down here in these last two categories, activity and output. We've moved to more output ones. The sales enablers are much better at getting to those output ones and operational ones. But it's the value creators that are working the upper end of the continuum, the outcome, the leading indicator, and the predictive types of measures. Okay. And that's, if you look at this continuum and you see where people are putting their energy, you can see that the value creators are putting their energy all across the board. There's still challenges for many, many organizations, particularly B2B organizations around B2B. But what you can also see is the trailing off of those metrics by the campaign producers and the sales enablers as you go to the right of the continuum. And so much better, much stronger here than their counterparts on outcome, and even stronger here in terms of leading indicators, and this is where you begin to see that big gap between the three groups. So number 7 out of 10 here, we're on our 7th best in practice. Back to this excel at measuring your contribution to the business. So how good do you do, right? And I think this really, when you ask this question of the C-suite, this is pretty glaring. Again, back to that gap. And it ties to what we've been talking about, really understanding how to select the right metrics, make it clear to how the leadership, team how you're impacting it. But it's also in your measuring process. So this is about measuring, not necessarily selecting the right metrics or understanding metrics or even communicating, but the way you measure. And that will tie into a couple of interesting things. One of the things it ties into is your marketing plan. So we see a lot of marketing plans. In fact, we have a product or a service called Marketing Plan Fast Track Reviews, and we're flooded every year, this time of year, with folks who want us to look at their plans. Happy for you to all check that out as well. And what we look for there are these logic chains. Is there a connective tissue between the business results and the marketing activities and investments? Is there a relationship in the measures and the metrics? Do the metrics go across the continuum, and do they connect to each other so that there is this outcome impact chain, and there, that there is a hierarchy and a logic chain, and in terms of the data and the measures. And when you do, so the whole plan is designed that way. Our customers, and this is the only thing I'm going to pitch to you, have really begun to change the way they plan and the kinds of plans they produce. So they're moving away from plans in PowerPoint or Word or Excel, which all have their value as an application, right? PowerPoint, which I'm using right now for presentations, Excel for crunching numbers, but those are not planning tools. So really having a different way to plan and making it visual in terms of that the C-suite can see the connective tissue of the activities to the outcomes, because that is what really allows you as a marketer to begin to see what you are doing and how what you are doing is moving the needle for the business, or is it, right? So the next thing has to do with, okay, you've got your plan, you've got your alignment, you've got your measures. Now we're into the analytics and data component of the story. If your data isn't relevant, that's a challenge to your credibility, and it's also a challenge to your influence. So these folks really do focus on using data. They're very good at using data both for marketing and for the leadership team. They use the data to make strategic decisions, to improve effectiveness, to make course adjustments. But they also make it extremely relevant to the C-suite, right? So back to, and that's, the data is a key way the leadership team I guess it's the right word, decides whether or not marketing has business acumen. Because if you're setting data up in marketing language and not business language, like if you're talking about your data and fans and shares and followers and website traffic and downloads and whatever you might be tracking, you're not talking in the language of business, and it doesn't necessarily relate. The C-suite doesn't really relate to it. And what you can see here is that the value creators are doing a much better job of getting the C-suite to recognize that the data that they are bringing to the table is relevant to making good decisions. So here is one of the ways that those value creators do that. It has a lot to do with the data that they're looking at, and it's very customer-centric, not only customer-centric, but very customer-centric. And you can see that compared to their counterparts, they're way to the right on all of these capabilities. You can see the sales enablers are making some inroads into a few key things, but the campaign producers are way below the line, right? So if you kind of think about that, that means you have to have the right analytical skills. So back to analytics for a moment. I'm sure some of you are using Salesforce, and they do research, and some of it's very good research. And one of the things that they did a study on earlier this year is on high performers and the use of analytics. And they said that 90% of the high performers understand the real critical value of analytics, and they are using analytics and finding ways to get more analytically inclined and capable. The CMO Council at the same time did a study regarding how often or how frequently are the data and analytics from marketing actually used to make business decisions. And really only about a third of the marketing decisions are actually made from using marketing analytics. Dr. Christine Moorman from Duke University also has a study that she's been doing since 1999, cmosurvey.org, and in her study, only a third of businesses use marketing data to make decisions. So you can see, even though we're talking about data and we're spending money on data and money on analytics and building analytics skills and putting in analytical tools, if we don't actually make use of that information in a way that helps drive business decisions and marketing decisions, it's all for naught. And what you can see, again, looking at our data, when it comes to mastery of analytics, analytics mastery and data mastery, again, value creators not great, still in the C range, but much better than campaign producers and sales enablers. So again, this area that best-in-class marketers are really focusing on. Okay, set measurable performance targets. So you've got your measures, you've got your plan, you've got your data, you've done your analytics, you've got your customer insights. The next key thing that differentiates the best-in-class marketers of value creators is that they set performance targets for everything they do that relate back to a business outcome. And this is really critical. So when you put things in like increase awareness or increase leads or generate, more press coverage, these are not measurable, right? Those are very broad brushstroke terms. And then, increase boost traffic or website traffic or whatever it might look like. When you use language like that and then come back and say, here's what we actually did, you arbitrarily are declaring success. See, we increased it. But the leadership team can arbitrarily declare failure because there hasn't been agreement on what that target needs to be. So this takes you back to that conversation, that earlier slide that I shared that talks about having clarity around how far does the needle have to move and how will you know that it did. So that's a key thing, again, that the best-in-class marketers are doing. Okay, they use 3 key tools very effectively. And again, this is sort of an action item for some of you. They are data inventory, metrics catalog, and those data chains or those metrics chains that we're talking about. Very important. So the best-in-class marketers understand data, where it is, what systems it's in, how it's collected, how frequently it's updated, who has access to it, those kinds of questions. They have an inventory of that, captured in some way that they can keep it updated and share it. They have a metrics catalog that is very clear. These are our measures. Here's what they measure, how we get that information, what data we use, how we calculate it, and what it's related to. And then lastly, they build those chains. So you can see once again that those are the 3 key tools, and they do use them and have them much more so than their counterparts. Okay, so this takes us to dashboards. Last thing I think here. The dashboards of the best-in-class marketers are very, very different from all the other groups. Many campaign producers and sales enablers, just like the value creators, have all kinds of marketing tools, whether that's a marketing automation system and a CRM system, or one or the other, whether that's through Salesforce or Oracle or Microsoft or something else specific to an industry. They all have them. But when you push the button on one of those systems and it says dashboard and use that as your dashboard, you haven't created an actionable marketing dashboard. What you've created or produced is a way to visualize the data within that system. And that's not quite the same thing. So these best-in-class marketers the value creators, they're looking at a dashboard and creating a dashboard that's very different. Yes, they pull the data from those systems and many other systems and other places to create the dashboard. And again, they're doing much better on all these key attributes of a marketing dashboard. Their counterparts, sales enablers, making good headway, although you can see they're stuck in a couple places where the gold color is down on 1 and 2, and you can also see that the sales enablers are very far behind. And a lot of this, you'll see that this chart and the insights chart are kind of related, because it's hard to have a good dashboard that's actionable and customer-centric if you don't have customer insights. So 3 things, 3 key areas is around marketing strategies and processes, something there. So that's back to that operational component. Communicating to the C-suite, marketing's contribution to the business. So that's back to your alignment and your accountability. And then look at the implications to your budget. So as the result, they're talking about the money, and they're talking about it again from that perspective of the investment as opposed to the perspective of expenses. Okay, so they start with these chains. They build them out. They start at the top. They work their way down. Campaign producers and sales enablers have a tendency to start at the bottom and work up. So that's another kind of indicator for us when we start talking with them. And when you have that chain, so you take that, you can create dashboards that look more like this. This is through a company called Hive9. Hive9 makes things like this, or Origami Logic. There are others. The key here isn't to come to me and say, what software should we use for our dashboard? It's not about a tool. If you don't have the other things in place, the tool won't help you. So that's really important to remember. Don't start with a tool. You've got to go back and look at your process and your measures and your plan and make sure you've got the alignment and the accountability and the data right before you try to put the dashboard together. So you can get lots of, we have lots of case studies that you can read. We've got some from credit unions and insurance organizations, so they're on our site. Feel free to go and download those. If you'd like a copy of this presentation, happy to share that with you. Here's what I can share with you about what our customers see when they go through this process. They reduce a hodgepodge of metrics by a lot. So instead of looking at hundreds of metrics, they're down to the vital few. Like we see 90% on average improvement or reduction to metrics that matter. So we have a lot of customers who have, again, it could be dozens to 150 measures that they're looking at, and they get these down to the vital few. They often see significant improvement, as much as 90% improvement in their workflow. They get the workflows more streamlined because they understand what's most important to them and which ones that have the greatest potential for impact. 100% tasks and activities are linked to outcomes. So they don't have these orphan activities, so they know that what they're working on makes a difference, and they're able to know what to say no to because it doesn't connect. There's no linkage to an outcome. And so that facilitates a whole different kind of conversation with the CFO, the C-suite, and others, and that's very helpful. And the budget becomes based on outcomes and performance targets as opposed to stuff. So it moves from that sort of traditional, here's how much money we want to spend on PR, and here's how much money we want to spend on digital, and here's how much money we want to spend on social, and here's how much money we want to spend on events, to a conversation of here's how much money we want to spend on getting existing customers to expand share of wallet into this new service or product. Here's how much money we want to spend on acquiring new customers in this particular segment, right? It's that kind of a conversation, and that changes things significantly. Okay, if you do it, you'll be able to move your organization to operating more like a center of excellence. And as you can see, that is one area that these value creators are working diligently to achieve, is serving and exemplifying a center of excellence within their organization. The others are trying. They're making headway. They certainly have made headway over the last couple of years, but a long way to go compared to their colleagues. And so think about this. If you want your marketing to be more relevant, the 3 things that you need to put together in your equation is your acumen, which we've talked about, your credibility, that's your alignment and accountability, and your relevance, which is your data. If you can work those 3 things in the equation, you will have more influence in the organization. So here's the equation. So first and foremost, get your business acumen, be a business person first. Develop and exercise that business acumen. It's a muscle. It's something you can learn. This is not one of those things that you're born with. If you go work it, you get better at it. Align before you act. Ask those questions. Select the metrics that matter. Be clear about that, and that will come right from your marketing plan if you do the marketing plan right. Pursue data quality. That's really important, and I know all of us are trying really hard to do that, and it is challenging, especially those of us who may have gone through mergers and acquisitions, which has happened a lot in the financial services industry. So that creates a lot of legacy and a lot of disparate data, and so that can be a challenge, but it is really important. You have to translate that data into action, right? And if you're not careful, you'll be sucked into the data vortex, and the best way to avoid being sucked into the data vortex is to have the plan structured in such a way that you can focus on first things first, so to speak. And then focus on your performance targets around the customer. Make them customer-centric as opposed to marketing-centric or sales-centric. That's really key. Okay, plan of action. I want to open it up, but I hope every one of you took away one good idea, at least one. And if you did, I hope you wrote it down, because it's always easy to remember a good idea if you write it down. And I also hope that this will inspire you to do something differently. All of us can see that 2017 is just weeks away. Many of you are probably planning right now. Here's a chance to do something differently and signal to your leadership team that you are making changes that are going to demonstrate that you want to make a difference for the business, and that you're going to show them how you're going to do that differently and better than you've done in the past. With that, ways to stay in touch. If you would like a copy of this, I'd be delighted to share it with you. And now I'd just like to open it up for questions.
Thanks so much, Laura. That was a wonderful presentation. Lots of information to think about and take back to the office. So I'm going to open it up to questions, and I encourage everybody that's on the call to ask any questions that you have that will help you clarify the information you've received today or help you in your day-to-day activities. So let's have a look and see what questions we have. So far, it's quiet out there. I haven't seen anything as yet.
So one of the questions we're often asked is, where can I get a quick win? I just want to let you know the best place to get that quick win is in the way you structure your marketing plan. If you do it differently, you're sending a message, right? And if you have that connective tissue clear, those chains very clear, you're sending a different message and signaling that you're doing something different. That's one place to begin. If you're wondering, where do we start? Almost all of you are probably in that place right now, doing that right now. And so it's, doing something different is hard if it's outside what you normally do. But doing something different within something you normally do, that's easier. So you normally have to create a plan anyway. You have to have a budget anyway. This is a chance to use that process and apply some of these new ideas. So that's a question we often get.
Thanks, Laura. I do have a question here, and that question is, what if your C-suite only looks at marketing as creative and not true marketers?
That's a great question. So when the C-suite looks at marketing as creative, that's really about campaign producers, right? That's that internal agency perception. So again, you have to start asking different kinds of questions. You have to say, yes, love to make that. Let's talk about the outcome that we're trying to achieve, how this ties to that, how we're going to know it made a difference. Right? You start talking differently, they'll start seeing you differently, right? You can't wait for them to see you differently. You'll have to take the lead in talking differently and acting differently, and then people say, oh, I can see that there's a change going on here. So that's back to, being more proactive and less reactive and less passive in the process. That's why that conversation is so important and why we always like to start out with that as one of the first things to do. Great question.
Thanks, Laura. Next question is, what if the C-suite does not share their business strategy with you?
Well, great question. And the reason they don't share it is they don't think that it matters, right? So again, engage in that conversation. I've been in marketing and sales my whole career, and I started it a long time ago. And I started in the insurance industry. So, and I've been in the banking industry. So I've been on both sides of the house. And I know how easy it is, again, to just be in the do mode. But it's our job to start asking better questions. I mean, when someone's not sharing it, you have to say, well, I want to be sure that I am making a contribution, right? And for me, I want to make sure that whatever we execute is the best way to execute, the best way to invest the money that you're entrusting to our organization, to our team, to me. So let me be sure I'm clear about what is the outcome that you think this ties to. Again, you kind of have to sort of step up to the plate.
That's great. We've got a couple of minutes left, so if anybody has any other questions, please share them with us so we can get you the answer.
I really appreciate everyone's time. Thank you.
Laura, we appreciate you spending the time to provide your knowledge and expertise in this area. And since we have no questions, we'll wrap things up for today. And our next webinar, as I said, is on December 13th. Again, Laura, thank you for a very insightful and informative presentation.
My pleasure. Y'all have a wonderful holiday season.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.